He didn't just fall to his knees. He collapsed, like a warrior whose armor had finally shattered. Mark Calloway, the man the world reveres as the Undertaker, dropped his phone and stumbled backward into the corner of his dimly lit Texas gym. His hands trembled. His lips moved but no sound came out. There, alone with the weight of a devastating truth echoing through the silence, the Deadman, the Phenom, wept. And what was the news that brought down the most feared man in WWE history? Hulk Hogan was gone. Gone. At 71 years old, the icon who immortalized professional wrestling, the man who pointed to the heavens and told a generation to say your prayers and take your vitamins, had taken his final breath. And no one took it harder than the Undertaker. We're not talking about some casual industry acquaintance. We're not talking about staged rivalries or rehearsed promos. We're talking about two titans who carried an empire on their shoulders. Two men whose paths were intertwined not just through storylines, but through decades of real-life respect, brotherhood, and loss. What if I told you that the image of the Undertaker breaking character for the first time in years wasn't in the ring? It was in front of a shattered screen, tears in his eyes, whispering the name of a friend who no longer existed in this world. Hulk. That was all he could say. This wasn't supposed to happen like this. Not now. Not this way. You see, Mark Calloway, this legendary figure we all know as The Undertaker, rarely shows emotion in public. For decades, he walked the line between man and myth, keeping his humanity buried beneath the persona of a stoic, supernatural warrior. He carried a coffin of mystery, never revealing the full truth behind his guarded eyes. Until today. Because when the news broke on July 24, 2025, that Terry Bollea, known to millions as Hulk Hogan, had died following a sudden cardiac arrest, something inside The Undertaker broke too. According to sources close to Calloway, the call came early in the morning. He was prepping for a private wrestling seminar, just another quiet day in his Texas estate, when a longtime friend from WWE dialed with a trembling voice. No words were needed. He knew something was wrong from the silence that followed the initial, hello. And then came the words that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Terry's gone. The Undertaker didn't speak. He just froze. Because this wasn't just a loss for the industry. It was personal. Deeply personal. Let's rewind the clock. Back in the late 80s, a young Mark Calloway was just breaking into the business, working regional promotions, earning pennies, and praying for a shot. That shot came, unexpectedly, because of Hulk Hogan. Hogan had seen tape of this tall, hauntingly intense newcomer. He didn't just see a future star, he saw a game changer. Hogan reportedly told Vince McMahon in 1990, "This kid's got something. Let me work with him. Let me help build him." And that's how it started. Hogan vs. Undertaker at Survivor Series, 1991. That moment didn't just launch the Deadman's legacy, it carved it into stone. But what most fans don't know is what happened after the cameras stopped rolling. Backstage, it was Hogan who walked over, put a hand on Mark's shoulder and said, "You're gonna go far, brother. Just don't let them change who you are." That one sentence never left him. In fact, those exact words were written on a plaque The Undertaker kept in his home gym for the last 30 years. And it's the same plaque he reportedly smashed with his fist upon hearing the news of Hogan's passing. Yes, smashed. Because behind the stoicism, behind the mystique, Mark Calloway is human. And that humanity erupted in grief. Insiders who spoke to WrestlingNewsCC revealed that Calloway isolated himself for nearly 12 hours following the announcement. No calls, no texts, not even from McMahon or his wife, Michelle McCool. Just silence. And in that silence, he mourned not just the passing of a legend, but the end of an era. Hulk was the last bridge, Calloway allegedly said during a whispered conversation with Kane. The last link to everything we built. Now it's just memories. And those memories were seared with emotion. The road trips. The locker room stories. The private pep talks before main events. The brotherhood that wasn't for show. He remembered Hogan flying to his mother's funeral in 2003, unannounced. He remembered the private letter Hogan sent him after WrestleMania 33. Never leaked, never publicized. He remembered that no matter what politics plagued WWE behind the curtain, Hogan was always the one who made sure The Undertaker got the respect he deserved. Because Hulk Hogan didn't just put wrestling on his back. He built the damn house. And when others tried to burn it down, he stood in the ashes and said, "What ya gonna do, brother?" But now, that voice is silent. And The Undertaker, whose career was forged in the flames that Hogan lit, is left standing in those ashes, grieving a man the world may have called a legend, but he called a brother. As tributes pour in from all corners of the wrestling universe, Cena, Rock, Flair, Triple H, none have hit as hard as Calloway's. Not because of what he said, but because of what he couldn't. In a video obtained by WrestlingNewsCC, never intended for public release, The Undertaker is seen holding a framed photo of Hogan backstage at a WrestleMania event. His voice cracked as he whispered, "You gave me the torch. You never asked for it back. Rest easy, brother." Then he wiped his eyes. And he bowed his head. For the first time in decades, The Undertaker mourned. Because legends never truly die. But even the dead man knows, some losses can't be buried. But that was only the beginning of the emotional shockwave. Because once The Undertaker broke down, it sent an unmistakable signal through the WWE locker room and beyond. This wasn't just another legend's passing, this was a spiritual death in the soul of professional wrestling. It was the kind of moment where time seemed to freeze, where egos were suspended, and even the most hardened superstars were brought to tears by the loss of the man who made wrestling what it is today. And while millions of fans were uploading tribute clips, digging through old Hulkamania promos, or dusting off red and yellow bandanas in mourning, something more private, more sacred, was happening behind WWE's tightly locked doors. We've now learned, through multiple internal sources, that within hours of Hogan's death, an emergency tribute meeting was organized at WWE headquarters. It wasn't announced. It wasn't public. It was just necessary. The Undertaker was invited. He declined. Instead, he sent a two-line statement to be read on his behalf. It read, "Don't honor him with silence. Honor him by doing what he taught us to do. Stand tall, stand proud, and never back down. I'll see you all when I can stand tall again." But the real heartbreak, that came from who read that message. Triple H. And witnesses at that private gathering said that Triple H, the current WWE CEO, could barely make it through those lines without choking up. His eyes red, his voice trembling, because this wasn't a show. This wasn't business. This was family losing one of its founding fathers. But The Undertaker wasn't ready to mourn in public. Not yet. Instead, he reportedly spent that night walking through his private memorabilia collection, a warehouse-sized structure near his home in Texas where he stores every robe, every urn, every title belt and match-worn artifact from his legendary career. And in a sealed, climate-controlled section labeled, "Icons," there were exactly two full-sized tributes built, one for Paul Bearer. And one, for Hulk Hogan. What happened next? It wasn't planned. It wasn't documented. But a close friend of Calloway's, who requested anonymity, shared this with WrestlingNewsCC. He sat there for 3 hours. Didn't say a word. Just stared at Hogan's tribute wall. Then he played a voicemail, on repeat. It was from Hogan, years ago. Just him saying, "Brother, you ever need me, you know I'm there." That was the moment the Deadman's armor cracked completely. He wept again. Not for the cameras. Not for the headlines. But for the man who helped make him. And then, he began to speak. Not to his friend. Not to the world. But to Hogan. "I'm still here. Still fighting. But damn, brother, it hurts. It really hurts." These are not the words of a legend playing a part. These are the words of a man lost in grief, facing something even darker than the supernatural storylines he once owned, reality. Because no matter how many times The Undertaker rose from the dead, he couldn't bring this one back. But that's when something remarkable happened. An unexpected visitor arrived at Calloway's home the following evening. It was Shane McMahon, and in his hands, he brought a locked metal briefcase, containing something that made The Undertaker sit down hard. Inside were the unpublished personal letters between Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon, some dating back to the earliest days of WrestleMania. Private exchanges, unfiltered thoughts, even criticisms. But tucked between those pages, handwritten and faded from time, was a letter, addressed to Mark. It had never been delivered. Dated October 2003, shortly after WrestleMania 19. And it began with 5 haunting words. "If you're reading this, I'm gone." In it, Hogan expressed his fear that the wear and tear of the business had finally caught up to him. He spoke of regrets, of pain, of wondering whether the fans would remember the man behind the mustache. But most of all, he thanked The Undertaker. For his loyalty. For his silence in times of chaos. For never stabbing him in the back, even when it would have been easy. And in the final lines, Hogan wrote, "You kept the darkness alive in the ring, but you brought light to my life when I needed it most. If I go first, promise me something, carry my legacy with you. Keep Hulkamania alive, even when the lights go out." The Undertaker couldn't finish the letter. He handed it back to Shane, stood up, and walked into the night. Because when the Phenom breaks down, it's not just grief, it's a signal. A message to the world that a seismic loss has occurred. And now, we ask the questions that haunt every wrestling fan's heart. Who becomes the final keeper of Hulkamania's flame? Who will step up when even The Undertaker feels the burden is too great? As tribute specials are planned, as WrestleMania teases a full Hogan memorial segment, and as legends begin flooding social media with tributes, we can't forget the man behind the myth. The Deadman behind the curtain. Because this story isn't just about Hulk Hogan's death. It's about what happens to the people who remain behind. And no one feels that more deeply than The Undertaker. He's not just mourning a legend. He's mourning the last living connection to the golden era that changed professional wrestling forever. And when he finally returned.